You already have an opinion about this. You think you know the answer. Either ancient humans were wild and had dozens of partners, or they paired up neatly like modern couples and stayed faithful forever. One of those two pictures is sitting in your head right now. Both of them are wrong. The real answer is stranger, more complicated, and more revealing about human nature than either version. And it comes from bones, teeth, genes, and the behavior of living populations that have barely changed in thousands of years. We are going to go through all of it today. Let's start with the science. Because this question isn't just interesting, it's one of the most debated questions in all of human evolutionary biology. Researchers have been arguing about it for decades, and the reason they're still arguing is because the evidence points in multiple directions simultaneously, which tells you something important right away. Ancient humans were not simple. The first thing scientists look at when trying to understand ancient mating patterns is something called sexual dimorphism. That's the size difference between males and females of a species. And it turns out that size difference is one of the most reliable indicators of mating behavior in the animal kingdom. Here's how it works. In species where one male controls a large group of females, like gorillas, males are dramatically larger than females. A male gorilla can be twice the size of a female. That size advantage evolved because males compete violently with each other for access to mates. The bigger you are, the more females you control. The more females you control, the more offspring you have. In species that are strictly monogamous, like gibbons, males and females are almost exactly the same size. No competition means no evolutionary pressure to be bigger. Everyone pairs up. Nobody fights. Now here's where ancient humans get interesting. Human males are larger than human females, but not by much. Not gorilla level different, not gibbon level similar, somewhere in between. And that in-between measurement suggests something in between behavior. The scientific term for this is mild polygyny, a system where some males have more than one female partner, but not dramatically more. Not a gorilla-style harem. Something more fluid, more situational, more complicated. But size difference is only one piece of evidence. The genetics tell an even more interesting story. When researchers study the genetic diversity in human populations going back hundreds of thousands of years, they find something striking. Throughout most of human prehistory, more women were reproducing than men, significantly more. In some periods, the ratio was as high as 17 women reproducing for every one man. Let that sink in for a moment. 17-1. That does not happen in a strictly monogamous species. If every man had exactly one woman and every woman had exactly one man, the ratio would be 1-to-1. The fact that it's dramatically skewed toward women means that throughout most of human prehistory, a significant number of men were not reproducing at all. They lived and died without passing on their genes, which means a smaller number of men were reproducing with a larger number of women. This is the genetic fingerprint of polygyny, and it shows up consistently across human populations studied from prehistoric periods. But here's where it gets complicated. Because polygyny in ancient humans was almost certainly not what you're picturing. It was not one powerful man sitting in a cave with 10 devoted wives who cooked his mammoth and raised his children while he went out hunting. That image comes from a very specific kind of organized polygyny that developed much later in agricultural societies when men could accumulate land and resources that gave them permanent power over women and other men. Ancient hunter-gatherer polygyny was messier, more fluid, and in many ways more interesting than that. Here's what the anthropological evidence from living hunter-gatherer populations actually shows. In most foraging societies that researchers have studied, the dominant pattern is serial monogamy, which means most people pair with one partner at a time, but relationships form, dissolve, and reform over a lifetime. Divorce in hunter-gatherer societies is remarkably easy. A woman who is unhappy with a partner can leave. A man who wants a different partner can pursue one. Children are often raised communally, which means the consequences of relationship dissolution are less catastrophic than they would be in an agricultural society. Within this general pattern of serial monogamy, some high-status men, better hunters, more respected leaders, more skilled warriors, sometimes had two partners simultaneously. But this was not the norm. It was the exception, available to a small number of men who had demonstrated enough value to attract and retain multiple partners. And here's the part that tends to surprise people most. Women in ancient hunter-gatherer societies were not passive recipients of whatever arrangement the dominant men decided on. They were active agents who made choices. They left relationships that didn't serve them. They pursued men they found attractive. They formed alliances with other women that gave them collective power. They chose when to have children and, in many cases, chose whose children to have. The evidence for female choice in human evolution is actually overwhelming. The ornamental features of human males, the beard, the deeper voice, the broader shoulders, are all characteristics that evolved under conditions of female selection. Women chose them. Over thousands of generations of women preferring certain kinds of men, those features became more pronounced. This is the opposite of what most people assume about ancient human relationships. Most people assume men chose women. The biology suggests it ran both ways, and that female choice was enormously powerful. Now here's the part nobody talks about. Paternity. In ancient hunter-gatherer societies, paternity was often uncertain, very uncertain. Many anthropologists believe that the concept of biological fatherhood, the specific idea that this child belongs to this man, was not a universal assumption in early human societies the way it is today. Some hunter-gatherer societies that still exist practice what anthropologists call partible paternity, which is the belief that a child can have multiple fathers. The idea being that multiple men contribute their essence to a single child through repeated sexual contact with the mother. In these societies, all the men who might be the father share some responsibility for raising the child, which means the child has multiple protective adults invested in its survival. This might sound strange, but from an evolutionary standpoint, it makes a certain kind of sense. A child with 3 or 4 adults invested in its survival has a dramatically better chance of making it to adulthood than a child with only one, and the mother of that child has dramatically more support. Some researchers believe that partible paternity may represent one of the oldest human relationship structures, predating both strict monogamy and formal polygyny. And here's the deeper point. The reason there is no single answer to how many partners ancient humans had is because ancient humans were responding to conditions. When resources were abundant, when populations were small, when group stability mattered more than individual reproduction, monogamy or near monogamy prevailed. When resources were scarce, when competition was high, when a powerful individual could gain access to more than their share, polygyny emerged. Human mating behavior was never a fixed system. It was a flexible response to circumstances. And that flexibility, that same cognitive and social adaptability, is what allowed humans to survive in every environment on Earth, from tropical rainforests to Arctic tundra, from coastal islands to high mountain plateaus. The question of how many wives ancient humans had doesn't have one answer, because ancient humans were not one thing. They were a species capable of running multiple different social systems depending on what the environment required. Here's what the full picture looks like. Most ancient humans, most of the time, probably lived in a system that looked like serial monogamy with occasional polygyny for high-status men. Women exercised significant choice. Relationships formed and dissolved. Children were raised communally. Paternity was sometimes uncertain and sometimes shared. There was no marriage contract, no ceremony, no legal framework. Just 2 people choosing each other for as long as that choice made sense for both of them. And underneath all of that, the same basic human drives that exist today were operating then. Attraction, jealousy, attachment. The specific ache of wanting one particular person and not someone else. The grief of losing them. The complicated arithmetic of balancing what you want with what your community will allow. Ancient humans had all of it. The only thing they didn't have was paperwork.